Good day to you, Guyana. Welcome to another program of Facing the Nation with the Leader of the Opposition. I am Malika Ramsey. It's great to have you keep our company again this week for another informative hour. Thank you very much for having us in your homes. And of course, with me today is Honorable Brigadier David Granger, the Leader of the Opposition in the National Assembly. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks very much, Malika. It's good to be here.
All right, wonderful. As you know, a partnership for national unity during the 2011 general elections, we have used, one of the things we've used, and not only used it, we mean it, national unity. And that's what our program will focus on today, because, you know, the PPP continue with their mischief and to do the bad things and then blame the opposition for it. And we saw in the Monday, July 2, 2012, that's an editorial in the Chronicle newspaper that will also be a part of our discussion today. And it's against that backdrop that we will be focusing on national unity, the importance of national unity, and we are also reminding you that a partnership for national unity's policy was and will always be unity. Now back to today's topic. We're focusing on the importance of national unity and the fact that it is still missing, and the PPP is doing everything that they possibly can to work against national unity. Now we'll have a statement from our Honorable Opposition Leader, Brigadier David Granger.
Thank you, Malika. Well, you just saw in the film clip a situation which reflects the attitude of the administration. They seem to be dividing the country in two. There is a red country with PPP supporters and a green country with APNU supporters. And I think this is something that we've got to be alert about. We've got to be aware, and we've got to ensure that all of the people of Guyana are treated as citizens, treated equally. And this is what we're talking about. And we were all surprised, astonished. We were disappointed last Monday to read in the state paper, the Guyana Chronicle, which assumes we assume that it's the policy of the administration, the People's Progressive Pacific Administration, an editorial which was completely racist, you know, and up to now we haven't seen an apology. And I think everybody who read that editorial was astonished that not only that it would be published, but that the state, the government of Guyana, would be responsible for such a publication. And if you can just look back at that editorial, I mean, some of the parts, if you can, I can just read it for the benefit of our viewers.
Yes.
Let me just read one or two bits of it. This is what the Chronicle says. The Chronicle, the taxpayers' money you're supposed to support. Black youths are socialized by opposition leaders to think that Indians rob them to get rich. So they automatically feel that they have to wrest by force, even murder, anything Indians have. This is what he's saying. Hatred of Indians is ingrained in their psyche. This is what the government is saying. That opposition leaders, and I am the leader of the opposition, so I take offense to this statement. Opposition leaders are telling black youths, African Guyanese youths, certain things so that they get this belief, this mistaken belief, that Indians rob them to get rich. Nothing of the sort happens. And this is a racist and provocative statement by the Guyana Chronicle. And up to now, the editor hasn't condemned the article, hasn't withdrawn, hasn't apologized to the African Guyanese population, nor has the minister responsible for communication, who is the president himself. That is the thing about this constitution, that unless the president appoints a minister for education, for information, he has personal responsibility, and this is what Mr. Bart Jagdeo capitalized on when he was president. So Mr. Donald Ramatara has personal responsibility for what appeared in the Guyana Chronicle newspaper. Let me go on, because there's another part on this editorial of last Monday in the Guyana Chronicle. When PNC leaders encourage young black men to attack members of the Indian community for gain, and they experience the sweetness of freeness, it is merely a matter of time before they turn their voracious ways towards PNC supporters, which has been happening for a while now. This is what the state newspaper is saying in 2012 in the Republic of Guyana, PNC leaders encourage young black men to attack members of the Indian community. Brothers and sisters, viewers, how could we tolerate this sort of thing from the state newspaper? We, in a Partnership for National Unity, established a partner for the first time in this country. We established a partnership of 10 parties in order to overcome this same hatred which is now being peddled by the Guyana Chronicle newspaper. 10 parties have come together. Right now in the National Assembly, there are 5 parties. We are all committed to national unity because the type of propaganda coming from the state media has been destructive of the very national unity which we need to build this country. So, brothers and sisters, I want in this program to call your attention to the hatred that is being spewed by the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration through its mouthpiece, the Guyana Chronicle, to ask you to look at the program of the Partnership for National Unity, because our program, our manifesto, our campaign was based exactly on national unity. 3 weeks ago, I was in the Rupununi, along with other APNU leaders from the Guyana Action Party, Mr. Sidney Alicock, Mr. Vincent Henry. And we went into Linden villages, and if you see how backward those villages have been kept after 20 years of PPP administration, you then start to understand what sort of government we have in Guyana under the People's Progressive Party Civic. If we are to move this country forward, we need to abolish the race hatred. We need to bring about racial unity, national unity. And this must be done not only between the ethnic groups in the country, it must also be done between tongue and country, between the coastland and hinterland. We need a government which erases the distinctions between the various races of this country. And right now, the Guyana Chronicle is reinforcing those distinctions in a most hurtful and hateful manner. And that is why I call on the government of Guyana, I call on Mr. Donald Ramatara, the president and the minister responsible for information. I call on the Guyana Chronicle newspaper to withdraw this offensive editorial, to apologize to the African Guyanese community and ensure that steps are taken to prevent its recurrence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Opposition Leader. And viewers, I know you're anxious to get your bit in on this because this is offensive to all of Guyana. But Mr. Granger, your call is not the first in terms as it relates to a withdrawal of such an editorial. And I just want, especially for someone who's been working in this area for a very, a specific number of years as it relates to writing, as a general rule, who is responsible at a newspaper agency? Who is responsible for the editorials? Is it not the editor?
The editor is ultimately responsible. And in fact, under the law, I think the proprietor of the newspaper could also be held responsible for what is published. Okay. This is an offensive publication, and unless the editor has not indicated any intention to apologize or to withdraw the publication, but ultimately, because this is a state-owned paper, the minister has responsibility. Unfortunately, in Guyana, we have a situation in which the Minister of Information does not necessarily report to the National Assembly. And that is where ministers' accountability will be put to the test. In this case, under the Constitution, because the portfolio of information is not specifically allocated to a named minister, it automatically reverts to the President, which means that the President has gotten himself in hot water here, because he is responsible for information, and the state-owned Chronicle falls within his portfolio. It is within his area of responsibility. So a question is going to be asked in the National Assembly about this matter, and I would like to see what the answer is going to be.
Okay, me too. I am very certainly anxious and can hardly wait for that response. Now, I would say that we have had progress in Guyana as it relates to racial harmony and national unity, and I'm sure many persons would agree with me that we've had some progress. What does an editorial like this do to our citizens who are, now going down the road of accepting each other regardless of race difference? Sorry.
It shows you that the progress that you think has been made is illusory. It hasn't been real progress because somebody in authority would have been able to stop such an offensive publication. What happens is that people say one thing but do something else, and that is the problem with the People's Progressive Party civic administration. They've been talking the talk, they've been talking about national unity, but in reality, on the ground, as we saw in the film clip, discrimination is still practiced. I myself have gone into some areas that have been flooded, and it is quite clear that the government equipment, particularly in West Berbice, has been deployed to relieve the flooding, or had been deployed to relieve the flooding in areas which are occupied by PPP supporters. And when some of the so-called APNU supporters asked about the equipment, they were told in a very flippant manner, you all voted for the APNU, let the APNU relieve the floodwaters from your land. So it is obvious that discrimination is actually taking place, regardless of what the PPP speaks, regardless of what the PPP says. I've been to some areas and I've seen the condition of primary schools, and it is clear that those primary schools exist mainly in areas which are assumed to be occupied by persons who don't support the PPP. I was in the Rupununi, as I said, and up to now the Rupununi doesn't have a proper roadway. It affects people's ability to travel and communicate. It affects farmers' ability to get their goods to the market. It affects the security and the safety of the people in those areas. You could have a huge area bigger than Costa Rica without a single highway. And the government knows what it's doing. It's deliberately neglecting the hinterland. So I can't agree that the PPP over the last 20 years has done much to deal with the problem of racial unity or of national unity. And in fact, recently I noticed that Mr. Ramkaran has been writing a lot. He's been with the PPP for 50 years, and now he's writing about national unity. The time has come for national unity, and this is the policy of the People's National Congress and the Partnership for National Unity. We realize that national unity cannot be achieved simply by talking about it. The framers of the present amendments that have been applied to the national constitution have realized that, and in fact Article 13 of the Constitution specifically calls for inclusionary democracy, because we feel that all ethnic groups, all social groups, all geographical areas of the country need to be able to express their views and come together and live in unity. The PPP is deliberately preventing that unity from taking place, and this hateful editorial is meant to drive a wedge between the Indians and Africans. We have a situation in which there are over 250,000 Africans. When the newspaper talks about black youths are socialized, are they speaking about 250,000 people? Are they serious? It is inflammatory and provocative, and it's not only provocative, but it's a downright lie.
Okay. It's unfortunate that I have to repeat this, but a few weeks ago we would have seen one of the presidential advisors, Mr. Odinga Lumumba, on television stating clearly his opinion. And since he's a presidential advisor, I say the PPP's opinion that the budget cuts will turn our young people into criminal. Again, unfortunately, I have to repeat this. Back then, I saw that as an attack on the opposition, Mr. Granger. Now, I'm seeing this too, not only as an attack on Guyanese people, but this is an attack on the opposition. Now, do you believe that the PPP is in some way threatened by the opposition?
They certainly feel threatened, and I think the greatest threat to the People's Progressive Party Civic was the 28th of November, when 175,000 people came out to vote for APNU and AFC, and only 166,000 voted for the PPP. Mm-hmm. So they're afraid, they're on the run, and they're using these devices in order to stir up trouble. It's part of the whole water cannon mentality. Mm-hmm. They're trying to provoke disorder and try to crack down on, introduce emergency legislation in order to bring greater burden and greater hardship on our people. So the remarks that you cited, and also this editorial, are part of a pattern of fear that has permeated the ranks of the People's Progressive Party since the 28th of November. They don't know what to do. and they are resorting to the worst form of administration, that is trying to divide the country so that they can rule. But they're going to fail because APNU is pressing for national unity, and we will continue to work towards bringing the people together. The people themselves will discover that is the People's Progressive Party that is dividing this country.
Okay, and finally, before we go to our phone lines, because I know our viewers are anxious to get their questions in, we saw in this article, this very offensive article too, that Linden was mentioned. If I can get some thoughts from you as it relates to a partnership for national unity stake as it relates to the electricity tariffs in Linden and what's happening now, the kind of sufferings and the discomfort that the people are experiencing in Linden at this point in time.
And the people of Linden have spoken, and APNU has been present throughout this crisis. We support the positions taken by the people of Linden and the people of Region 10 as a whole. There are very grave economic problems because the entire region was dependent on the mining of bauxite. And the families which have been dependent on mining have been seriously affected over the years, and there has not been an opportunity for alternative manufacture, alternative forms of economic enterprise to spring up to provide a good livelihood for the people. We all know that unemployment in that region is well above the national average, maybe even double the national average. And we have put it to the government, and the Lindeners themselves have put it to the government, not that they don't want to pay, but they can't pay the increased tariffs unless there is some meaningful economic development. And we have not seen that form of economic development start to work. That is the position that APNU took from the outbreak of the crisis, and that is the position the Lindeners themselves have maintained, and we support the Lindeners in their struggle. So it is not a question of APNU, it's a question of the People's Progressive Party trying to divide the people of Linden and Region 10 from the rest of the country by trying to create the illusion that everything is okay in the region and that there are no grounds for complaint. But the PPP is very well aware of the situation in Linden, particularly with the economy, and that the Lindeners have said clearly that they're not in a position to pay the increased rates.
Okay, I must ask this, it may be bordering a bit on the ridiculous end, but APNU had a press conference yesterday, and one of the persons, the members of the media, posed the question as it relates to a statement that the Prime Minister recently made, basically saying that the next time he's going to Linden, or I should say that he's afraid to go to Linden again without security. Mr. Granger, any comment that you'd like to make on such a statement? Of course, he's saying that because of what's happening now, and the people are protesting. They can't afford to pay the increase in tariffs. Now, when the Prime Minister is going to say that, he wants security the next time he's going to Linden.
Well, that's very odd. The Prime Minister lived at Linden for a long time. In fact, during the last election, he was even designated, I think, as the Member of Parliament with regional responsibility for Linden. Of course, that was due to an arithmetical error, which was never corrected. But the Prime Minister always has security at his side. I don't see what he's afraid of. If the policy is sound, if the PPP is as popular as they make out to be, why should he be afraid to go among his own people? So I can't understand the remark at all, but as far as I know, the Prime Minister's always got security, and I don't think he's ever been hit by a member of the opposition or by a criminal. So it's part of the scare tactics, a part of the effort by the People's Progressive Party to create this image that there are people out there who want to create instability in the country. And I think the ordinary people wouldn't believe it because it's untrue. People want a good life, and they look to the APNU to provide that good life. And remarks by the Prime Minister or by Mr. Lumumba about security and the situation at Linden just don't hold water. The Linden people are quite peaceful, they're quite friendly, but they want a better life. And right now, they are under pressure because of the threat of tariff increase by the People's Progressive Party.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, sir. Viewers, I'll now open up the phone lines for you to call with your questions or your comments. Turn the volumes of your television sets down when you're coming through. Be respectful and be as brief as you possibly can. Welcome, caller.
Yeah, good afternoon. Opposition leader.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I want to find out something. It's not the Constitution say that the minister is supposed to be reporting to Parliament. It's the president to be a minister. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, caller. I'll take a few more before we get responses.
Very sorry. This
Caller, are you there?
Good day, yes.
Yes, good day, sir. Go ahead.
I'd like to know what is being done about propaganda which is still being peddled in the Chronicle and daily, day and night, by NCN about the, especially to the communities where the private television stations can reach regions 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Yes.
All those people are hearing is the propaganda being put out. The next thing I'd like to ask is what is the name of the editor of the Chronicle newspaper? And one more thing. I see the president went to Enmore and he spoke about the disunity in the labor movement because the labor movement does not practice democracy. I'd like the president to realize that if his party was practicing democracy, he would not have been president today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Just before Mr. Granger responds to you, on the note of persons in Region 6 only seeing propaganda, I understand that because, yes, NCN is working overtime with the lies, but just so that I can inform you, represents a Partnership for National Unity's representatives living in areas like Region 6 and Region 5. They have indeed been working tirelessly to get some of what happens in Georgetown here as related to APNU out on the air, and they've been successful. So just keep looking out, and the persons, if you have relatives living in those regions that you would have spoken about, tell them to keep looking out, and they will see exactly what's happening with APNU, because we're trying our very best to get as much footage as we can into those areas. Brigadier Granger.
Thank you, viewers, for those questions. You're quite right. It's the minister's duty to report to the National Assembly, but we have a situation in which we have an executive president, and although he may have responsibility, portfolio responsibility for a certain activity. In this case, the president has responsibility for information. He can nominate a minister, and normally the prime minister would do that. For example, the president is Minister of Defense, but he doesn't go into Parliament. The prime minister would, like for example, during the budget debates, the prime minister would be the one who would answer questions, would make presentations about defense. So that is the normal procedure. I think this could be done in the case of the Ministry of or responsibility for information, that the president could nominate someone, and it could be anyone. It could be, for example, the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. But let's see what happens when APNU asks that question. The other question that was asked about the propaganda coming out from Chronicle and the NCN and GINA. Well, many of you don't see GINA, but the GINA releases normally form the backbone of the publication of Chronicle. In fact, they sometimes word for word. You want to know what's the point of having a separate newspaper, because they simply copy everything that GINA puts out without checking. I think all of the reporters in Chronicle could perhaps go home and sleep and just print the releases. Now, we know very well that the government, the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration, has followed a deliberate strategy of starving the hinterland and outlying areas of correct information. They feel that if they continue to peddle one side of the story, one set of information, the people will believe. The trouble is that the people have lost faith because the state agencies have lost their credibility. You can't tell indigenous people that you're building good roads or you're developing their facilities, when they can see clearly the opposite is taking place. For example, indigenous schools. Over 2,500 indigenous children live in schools, and those schools have repeatedly been suffering from food shortages and overcrowding and absence of qualified teachers. So even while they're talking about the budget cuts affecting the schools, the Amerindians themselves know that this is untrue, because even before the budget, they had food shortages at Aishalton and at Port Kaituma and at other places. Although I agree with you in saying that the state media are using propaganda, are employing propaganda, to provide or to purvey misleading information to the general public, they are shooting themselves in the foot, because they're losing credibility, and people right now don't want to buy the Chronicle, they want to read the Chronicle, and eventually it is going to affect the NCN and GINA as well. That is why, viewers, when we went into the National Assembly, we refused to approve allocations for the NCN, and we cut the budget down to $1, because the NCN does not behave in a professional manner. And this is exactly what has caused the meltdown in NCN, which has had a knock-on effect on the GT as well. So the APNU, by taking decisive action in the National Assembly, was able to expose the shallowness of NCN and the entire state propaganda machinery.
Okay. Welcome, caller.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good day.
Your question concerning the electricity in Linden. Do you think it's fair for the rest of the country, these Linden people must be paying 15%, $15 per kilowatt, and the rest of the country
Okay.
55 and 60%?
Okay, caller. Caller, you probably tuned in late, but Mr. Granger, Honorable Opposition Leader, has already stated that APNU is not in support of Lindeners paying increased tariffs because they simply cannot afford it. And he has made several statements on the fact that we will not support increased electricity tariffs for Linden until there's proper development in that region. Good day to you, caller. Caller, are you there?
Yes, Malaiko.
Yes.
Good day to you, Mr. Granger.
Good day.
Yes, now the first thing I would like to ask a question. What is the real name of this dear land that I happen to be living on?
The real name of our land?
Yes.
The Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
And I must charge Mr.
The Granger.
Mr. Granger just now was saying the Republic of Guyana.
Okay.
He keeps saying the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I think we can instill in our youth what it is like to cooperate. Cooperate means to be alive with each and everyone, every neighbor in your country. And we can build it. You know what the song says? We must cooperate to build Guyana. And how long that we cannot get that cooperation, we will not be able to build Guyana. And all the things that are coming out from the ruling party is to destabilize our country. They're saying that those of us on the other side, if we cooperate with each other, then we can allow that cooperation to spread among those of them who are in disbelief. Unless we work together, we can never have a wonderful and happy country. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. But I must add that a partnership for national unity with Mr. Granger at the helm has been trying. We have been trying to communicate and to cooperate with the PPP, but they're simply not interested. That doesn't mean that APNU will give up. But the PPP will have to learn that they're no longer the majority and they can't do as they please and ignore the opposition.
What happened in 2011 is that people were voting for issues. People were fed up with the PPP lies. They were fed up with being told, well, look, you're Indian, therefore you must vote for this party. What happened is that the PPP alienated sugar workers, and sugar workers think about their own interests. And that is why so many sugar workers defected from the People's Progressive Party, because the PPP made a mess of Gaisuku. People live in poor areas. I myself have been up to the quarantine. I've spoken to fishermen who have been attacked by pirates, and the People's Progressive Party is doing nothing about piracy. So what happened in November 2011 is that people said, look, I'm not voting race. I'm not going to vote for a particular party or a particular presidential candidate because he is of my ethnicity. We are going to vote for people who are going to protect our interests, and that is exactly what started to happen. So I agree with the caller who said that the people's eyes are opened. The political process has been an eye-opening one, and I can just advise you to keep your eyes open and keep your eyes on that Chronicle newspaper, because we are going to use our strength in the National Assembly to make sure that even if they remain under state ownership, that they start to follow good journalistic practices and don't divide the people of our country. It's not befitting of the state, a state-owned enterprise. It's not even befitting of a professional journalist, and we're going to do something about it with the votes that you gave us on the 28th of November 2011. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Well said as always. Unfortunately, callers, this is where we have to leave you this week. Thank you very much for having us in your homes and being a part of another informative program. I am Malaika Ramsey, reminding you to be good Guyanese citizens. As always, take care of yourselves and each other. Until next week, goodbye.